Let's call ourselves to order, meeting of the West Newbury Board of Selectmen, Monday, March 1st. It is 7:05 PM. First, a couple of announcements. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. The meeting is also accessible by remote participation. This is a Zoom meeting. The phone number is 646-558-8656. The meeting ID number is 960-1795-2702. And the passcode is 798-275. Just a reminder that all people employed by the town, people on volunteer boards, committees, commissions, all town employees, anyone with responsibility in the town needs to complete the Mass State Ethics Commission Conflict of Interest Law online training program, and it has to be, has to be done every 2 years. So just 2 years goes by really fast. I know I check on mine and I think, oh my goodness, I got to do it pretty soon. I have done mine recently, but I just to remind people, everybody has to do that. The town election is Monday, May 3rd, and nomination papers are still available through the town clerk. The nomination papers are due back to the clerk's office with signatures by March 15th. just to keep people in mind, this year the annual and special town meetings are going to be after the election, and so they will be Saturday, March 22nd, at a time to be determined.
May 22nd.
What did I say?
March.
Oh, okay, sorry. May 22nd. And for anyone to keep up with what's going on in town, news and announcements, you can subscribe at wnewbury.org/subscribe. So without further ado, item A on the agenda is regarding some informational topics related to the COVID-19 clinic, planning for vaccine clinics, and establishment of a regional memorandum of agreement among the participating communities. So initially, the town, along with approximately 7 or 8 other local communities, Amesbury and Newburyport, Raleigh, and so forth, everyone got together and put together the vaccine clinics that happened at, for example, at the senior center in Newburyport and at the Page School in West Newbury. The governor subsequently has put the brakes on the smaller regional vaccine centers such as this, feeling that the larger ones are more efficient and the more people are getting done using that rather than the small local vaccine clinics. So there's been some pushback from the communities and from government leaders, civic leaders, and so perhaps with the local communities being able to ramp things up to be able to do the increased numbers that the Commonwealth is seeking from the vaccine clinics, maybe we will be able to restart those. So that's sort of the background. Angus, you want to fill us in some more on that?
That's a great summary, Archie. Just to kind of bring it up to the present, this regional coalition that you mentioned is continuing to actively collaborate. We had a remote meeting last Tuesday attended by the mayors of Newburyport and Amesbury, and representatives of health and finance administration and emergency management from the 9 participating towns. So, as you said, we are hopeful that we can go back to the state and at some point get approval to, again, receive vaccine as a region. A couple of the discussion items. One, the governor had set a goal of being able to vaccinate 750 people a day for 5 days. One of the questions we've asked is if we could hit that overall aggregate target per week, but let's say do it in 2 days instead of 5 with more vaccines per day. That's something that if the state could accommodate us on that, we feel very comfortable we could do that for a number of reasons to do with availability of facilities as well as availability of volunteers. It would be much better for us to be able to do 2 weekend clinics rather than 5 days when, for instance, the Page School is in use as a school. So we don't know if we'll get that consideration or not. And even if we don't, there's work going on as to whether we could meet that 5 day of operation if necessary. But so that's some of what's being discussed. There's another meeting this Thursday. We'll talk about that further. The second major item is the need to have some kind of a written agreement among the participating communities to address things like reimbursement of eligible costs. Because, for instance, if the vaccine is, even if it's administered on a regional basis, if it's given to a specific community and is kind of under their umbrella, that community, our understanding is they might be the only ones eligible to seek reimbursement of costs from FEMA. So if, for instance, West Newbury were to incur costs associated with a clinic hosted in, let's say, Amesbury, we need to make sure that we can submit those costs to Amesbury for them to then get reimbursed from FEMA and to reimburse us from FEMA funds, for example, because it's our understanding, we wouldn't be able to separately submit those costs to FEMA because they wouldn't technically be under, the auspices of a clinic we ran. So there's definitely some administrative details that we're looking to put together, hopefully a succinct MOU or MOA among participating communities that addresses things like how the expenses will be handled and how the reimbursements will work.
Angus, I mean, this is something that we should talk about on future agendas, but just on the COVID topic. So one of the governor's new changes with moving on to different phase now is that more openings of things, and perhaps future meeting we discuss the more access of the public now to the town hall, and also I noticed one of the recommendations is that the Commonwealth has now allowed summer camps. So does that change the Park and Rec's feeling about, will that change their feeling about the summer recreation program? So we don't need to talk about it now, just bringing that up.
All right. They do have another meeting this Wednesday. The Park and Rec Commission met this past Thursday evening, and they'll meet again this Wednesday.
But those rules just came out after that meeting, yeah.
Right, yeah. It was mentioned at Thursday night's meeting that Paul had been on a call earlier Thursday, so I had let the commission know about that at their meeting Thursday night. But yeah, like you said, that no one had reviewed the actual guidelines, so I'm not sure what direction they'll go with that.
Okay. So in another related, a lot of cities and towns throughout the United States have designated today, March 1st, as a COVID-19 Memorial Day, in remembrance of those that have lost their lives and honor those who suffer from the impacts of this virus. So I just thought people should be aware of that today, that's sort of perhaps a new day that we will be thinking about in the future. But that's what's happening at the for March 1st. Our next item is a request to, oh, and I forgot to, in the announcements, I forgot to say, Mr. Kemper will not be with us tonight. He has a work-related problem, so he was at the last minute had to bow out. So no problem with Glenn. It's a work situation. The next item, I see Lori is here. There's a request to install the plant sale banner on the training field from May 1st to May 15th. This is always a bone of contention. Rules, I always say rules are made to be broken. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to have to vote on things. We just go along, everything go along with the book. There's been sort of a historical precedent that the garden club has been allowed to use the area around the training field. They use the right across the street for the plant sale, and so in order to publicize that in the area where the plant sale will be, sort of grandfather in the permission to allow that sign. I'll speak for Mr. Kemper. He doesn't like that we do that. He feels that we're making an exception, and so that I know I speak for Glenn that he would not support this. So that's where we stand. So Rick, it's up to you. It's 1-1.
I move that we, understanding and acknowledging Selectman Kemper's likely perspective on it, not agreeing with it, I'd nonetheless make a motion that we do grant approval to hang the West Newbury Garden Club plant sale banner for the period of Saturday, May 1st through Saturday, May 15th.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Second, all in favor? Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks for your time, guys. Good night.
Yeah, thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Our next item is that there is now a new there's a vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Judith Gregg is unfortunately moving out of town, so there is a vacancy on that board. So that people understand that the board has a lot of important duties, but they happen sporadically. Sometimes there's a lot to do, and sometimes there's very little to do. Interesting board, and it has some significant decisions to make. And someone would like to make a contribution to the town, I would recommend applying for the position on that board, and contact the town manager's office to do so.
Angus, the composition of the board beyond the full members, is there were there 2 associates on the ZBA?
That's my recollection, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Does one of them want to step up, Angus?
I know that the one person we had as a associate was not available to become a full board member. We looked into that last summer. So I'd have to check if we have a second associate, and if we do, what their interest would be. So I believe that was Dennis Lucy is the associate. And back when Kim Monahan Borgioli was appointed, we had talked to Dennis about did he want to become a full member, and because of some time availability issues, he was not available. So I think with Judy's resignation because she's moving out of town, that will leave us down down one full member and still down one associate
So if there is a well, suppose someone was just absent for medical reasons or something, can the associate step in and become a voting member for a one meeting if so needed?
Yes. Yeah, as long as they certify that they've reviewed all the materials or,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering with Daniel Lucy as well as the other member, but specifically for Daniel Lucy, I think my impression, I thought I don't recall if he said it at one of our meetings or if it was in writing, but it sounded as though he was sort of stepping back in recognition that there was somebody else able to take the position, but that I guess I didn't get the impression that he just was not at all available. And I'm wondering if we ought to reach out.
Yeah, he's available as an associate.
So at the moment, we don't now, excuse me, have a big 40B project to be dealing with. So it might not be the time commitment that he had anticipated a year ago. That's all.
Yeah, this was back in November. So yeah, I can check with him again if his family situation has changed.
Okay.
But right now,
having said that, we
real
still
urgency on that.
We still would like people to volunteer, because regardless, even if he did, we'd still need people. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and Judy did a really nice job. I just want to say she was a real contributing member of that board, and among other things, did all the meeting minutes, which, as you know, is not easy to find someone willing to do that. So I definitely want to recognize Judy's contributions.
You should know that the board, there are just a couple of applications were just filed before the ZBA, so they'll be looking. They'll be looking for members. They're going to be hearings, starting to be scheduled shortly.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Our next item is a request for authorization to apply for the shared streets grant. That's impossible to say, to support installation of pedestrian activated signals on Main Street near the middle high school. Wayne, do you want to tell us about the details of this grant?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fast track grant that the state sponsored due to the COVID-19 to get people safer to walk around and be out, because everybody was out doing things in the last 12 months. So this grant actually ends on Friday. This Friday, it was the fourth round, and this is the final fourth round of it. It's a grant to encourage walking, make walking safer, and increase transportation. So I did have a conversation with MassDOT. You saw the letter that Angus sent us this afternoon. I did have a phone call with them the other day about the two potential locations that we have concerns about crossings. This grant is due on Friday. It's a fast track grant, and it has to be built, I believe, by the end of May. So it gives you like 90 days to build right now. So it's pretty tough. So we thought that the high school / middle school is pretty straightforward. We're looking at a couple of flashers there that you press and you activate to cross the roadway. Where at the paid school, for example, the state was very hesitant about doing anything there without looking at sidewalk installations, roadway realignments, narrowing of the roadway, improved striping, improved lighting. So that location would have to be engineered. It would take us 90 days to engineer that location if it is to build it. Where actually the high school / middle school, we could probably engineer that in a week and have it, built within the 90 days.
What's the time, Wayne, if we were to, let's say, when would we get notice of obtaining the grant? And if we did, is there enough lead time to get the equipment ordered and delivered?
The vendor claimed he could turn it around within 60 to 90 days. So it's, of course, he's going to say that. The vendor that the state has used is a local vendor, I believe, out of North Reading. They're local. They did say that they should be able to meet the requirement within 60 and 90 days. Now, what happens if it's 91 days? I don't know what that answer is, but we'll make it work at the end of the day if that's the worst case. But we should know about the grant. I was told by the state that they'd probably tell us by the Friday after next if we got the grant. So they understand it's a fast track grant and they can't wait to tell us a month that we got it. They only give us 2 months to do the job instead of 3. So we should, if we apply for it this week, we should have an answer by the week after, the end of the week.
Wayne, would there be any kind of, I don't know, I'm just playing devil's advocate. Would there be any kind of electrical issue, something that's going to having to, dig up the street and put the wiring in it that would slow things down that you would anticipate, or no?
We're recommending doing solar at this location. So there is no underground conduit work. Okay. The only thing you need to do is take out a 5-foot concrete block out of the sidewalk, put a preformed foundation in, and pour the new concrete, on the last day of May. So it would hold. We could actually pour it early May, but it's there's no wiring involved.
Okay. Great. I'd make a motion to approve application for the Shared Streets Grant.
Second that?
Further discussion? All in favor? Archibald, aye.
Parker,
aye.
Great. Thank you.
Let's hang on, when you may contribute to the next one too.
Yep, I'll say.
We're going to talk about the some design changes recommended for the Middle Street Bridge project. So Angus, you have to tell us about that.
Okay, so as you know, the bridge is currently before the Concoms in both Newburyport and West Newbury. In both communities, the hearing opened and was continued to a second session, and the BSC, our engineer, had requested a continuance beyond the scheduled dates to allow them a little more time to deal with some of the issues that came up. And the main question that's before us now is to do with how stormwater is being handled. And right now it's country drainage, so it's just sheet flow off the side of the road into the gully, and eventually gets back down into the water source. And so the question was raised at one, if not both, of the Concom hearings about whether there ought to be pretreatment of that stormwater runoff. So BSC had sent us a proposed change order, which would have involved expanding the geographic scope of the project to install curbing along lengths of road leading up to the bridge, and to channel that stormwater runoff into the catch basins, which would then go through storm scepter stormwater quality structures. So we had a remote meeting on Friday with representatives of the city, myself and Wayne with BSC. And in the course of talking things through, we felt that a way to address the question that was asked without expanding the geographic scope of the project and without taking on a potentially very costly change order would be instead to put some stormwater quality treatment, these storm scepter units, where the catch basins would go. So there would be some treatment of the runoff that gets into those, but we're not recommending that we propose expanding the scope of the project to include curbing to channel more of the stormwater into the storm scepters. Wayne, is that a sufficient summary?
Yes, I would say that hit it.
Okay, so obviously the Board of Selectmen are the applicants. So any change order as has been proposed, we would bring to this board to make sure that whatever design direction is made when BSC appears before the Concom's on your behalf, that they're confident that any change that's made is based on your direction as the client. So that's why we're here. So
my question, I didn't understand from so is the concern that this, in other words, the say asphalt on the top of the bridge, the runoff from that, or would it be that would contain petroleum products or whatever, or is it more just general, the fact that there's automobiles and brake linings and other things like that from the automobiles, or in other words, what the basis of my question is, if we change the surface of the bridge, would that somehow say it was poured concrete rather than an asphalt surface on the bridge, would that affect how the conservation commissions would feel about things? I just wonder what is in the water that they would be concerned about.
I don't think if it's concrete or asphalt changes. What they're trying to take control is the stormwater runoff. And obviously, if there's a problem that happens and a truck breaks a vehicle loses a brake line and the fluid goes, I mean, that's something that could happen no matter what road you're on. It could end up into the drink. We've had that there for a long time with country drainage out there. They want us to try to capture as much of that water as possible, and we want to just narrow the scope down to more closer to the bridge itself and treat what's ever at the bridge that goes to the low point, and treat that stormwater or any type of runoff in the interceptor that we're proposing. I mean,
So-
you have to keep in mind that, you know, Turkey Hill Road runs right beside the reservoir as you drive around Turkey Hill, and you know, we don't have anything to treat any of that runoff, and there's been cars in the drink there over the years. So it's not like there's no way of stormwater running into the reservoir. There's probably 50 points where stormwater goes into the reservoir. This is one of the locations that they're focusing on because we're working at that location now.
Right, because we're there, we're trying to make that perfect, even though the rest isn't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the increasing the scope, I'm thinking about just picturing that in my mind. So you're coming down Middle Street, and just before on the West Newbury side, there is sort of a whatever 15-20 degree slope coming down a short hill before you get to the bridge. So is that what some of the concern is, that the increasing the scope would be having to do something with that part of the road in West Newbury?
That's correct. So you would have to berm the whole road all the way up to you get to land again. So that's probably I'm guessing 200 feet maybe plus. And then you would need more infrastructure to treat that water. Right now, we were focusing on just treating the water, the stormwater that was at the bridge, with the catch basins that's already been designed in this design. Replace the catch basins with an interceptor instead. So all we're doing is taking out the catch basin and putting in an interceptor. If we go with their proposal to treat 100% of the roadway that crosses the artichoke, you extend the limit of work by 200-300 feet. You have to treat it, and they want us to treat all that 200 or 300 feet of water, all that 200 or 300 feet of stormwater runoff or particles.
Okay, so are there at the moment catch basins built into the design of the bridge as it is now?
Yes, it is. They're proposing catch basins on the new design.
In the middle of the bridge or on the sides, or where?
I'm not sure. Well, it will be on the edge where the curb is. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 4, how many they're doing, but they are proposing it. But that means the water just goes in the catch basin, it goes untreated, and it goes right into the water. We're proposing to treat that water now, so it doesn't go directly in.
Right.
without getting
Okay.
treated.
So these treatment devices, what's the kind of maintenance on them? Is it complicated or what?
It's a sump, so the bad stuff's going to sit on the bottom, and the pipe inside that outfalls into the water source is a little higher. So anything that's heavy, thick, stone, sand should go to the bottom. Understanding this, the worst case is on an interceptor like this, you might have to pump it out. You might not be able to clam it. Use a clam to grab it. What we do town-wide is we use a clamshell. Then if we have any trouble locations, we have the pump truck come in to do certain locations that are trouble. So we would add this to our list. For the other 4 or 5 we have in town, we would add these 2 or 3 onto that list. So it's not the worst thing. It's not like the truck's not in town anyhow.
Wayne, I think from looking at those interceptors, the data sheet they gave, I think they also separate out the any oil type,
Yep.
oil, gas, whatever, and so I assume they have to suck that out in order to because that flows to the top. So
Yes.
isn't that right? Yeah.
Yes, you're right. And I think the open is pretty small too, so you'd have a hard time getting that stuff out. Though, I mean, every catch basin in town might have particles in there that we have today, but the standard practice is to clamshell it out. But in this case, because we're going to have pipes in there and it's going to be pretty busy, you're probably better off putting a hose in there and trying to suck out like 100% of it. And we could talk to Newbury Port because they actually own a pump truck to do this. So they might be an option to use, and we might be able to switch every other year or whatever. We'll do 1 year.
Yeah.
We'll do another
Well,
year.
this
So
is like some kind of if there was a unless it was a serious, like you say, brake lining leak or gasoline leak or something. This isn't something that's going to be like hazardous waste removal or anything like that, adding incredible maintenance costs all the time.
well, any catch basin is considered hazardous waste. So anything that anything we take out of town, we have to put into a certain pile, and we have to pay to have it removed, and we have to do a bill of lading. We have to show where it's going, and we keep that in our stormwater file. So you can't just throw it away or trash it into a dump.
Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a relatively recent change just in the last few years coming out of the MS4, isn't that right? Well,
I would say it's being
been a change in practice.
Yeah, let me just say we're all following the rules now. I think that might have been an existing law for a while now.
Okay.
But I think we're all starting to get on board with it now. So it does cost money to trash to dispose of that. So we have to dispose 350 catch basins a year worth. So this will be 354 catch basins worth of stuff. So it's not going to be a different hazardous waste. It's just going to add to the other hazardous waste we have in town that will go away every spring.
Yeah. So I was at the site walk where both Concoms were there, Wayne.
Yep.
And the city engineer was Eric John White, I think, from
John Eric.
John Eric. I'm sorry. Yeah. He acknowledged that they currently do have the capacity to clean out the catch basins, and I don't think he could speak, explicitly for the DPW, but for their DPW, but he seemed to think that it was not unreasonable if they were out there cleaning on their side of the bridge that they'd be able to do it. The ones on the West Newbury side, particularly considering that they have the equipment and we don't.
Yeah, they have a truck that they paid a lot of money for because I wrote the spec for it. But what we did, because it was such a nice truck, we still sent a contractor out to get out the yucky stuff because we didn't want to ruin the truck. So they actually have a contractor in like we do who will suck that stuff out also.
When you were supposed to phrase that, they paid a really good price because I.
Yeah. So it's nothing different than any other catch base we have in town. It just needs a little bit more attention.
I
And
see.
it might have a fabric bag inside. I have to look at the drawing again. It didn't really describe that. So it might be something we have to remove, suck out, and then put the bag back in again. So again, it's nothing unusual.
Well, the fact that those, I don't know, we probably don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I think because those will also retain any liquids that's lighter than water. They designed so they exclude the lighter stuff. It flows on the surface. They probably will have a different mix than, a typical catch basin, just everything washes through. If there's a little bit of oil or anything like that, doesn't it?
Well, some of our catch basins do have sumps in them. A lot of them have
They do?
sumps. Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Majority of them have a sump. More do than do not. So
Okay, so what do you want us to do?
Wayne, do you want to just briefly summarize the question that came in today with the email from Micah? And we just want to make sure that they're, like I said, that when they're appearing before Concom, that
Yep.
so basically, so BSC has said, would we like them to scope the addition of 2 deep sump catch basins and a water quality unit on the Newbury Port side? And I think Wayne and I agree that is what they should do.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
But
Okay,
before
so-
we got back to them, we just
Yeah.
wanted to review it with you as the
Okay.
client.
Okay, so do you need us to make a motion, vote on it, or just move forward?
I think if you're in agreement, I don't
Yeah.
think we need a
Yeah,
formal vote
okay.
on it.
Great, okay.
And Wayne, if you could communicate that back to Micah.
I can do that this evening.
And before we if we're done with this topic, before we let Wayne off, I did include on tonight's agenda just the discussion of our review of the Mill Pond stuff. Glenn was the one who had asked about that, so we might want to defer on that to a future meeting when he's here. But I wanted to see whether those studies that I found were the ones he had in mind when he asked that question. So if we do want to talk about that, we should talk about it now with Wayne on, but we might want to wait.
Wayne, I just wanted to. I did read the whole thing. I read the whole thing and I said the only thing I got out of it is we should clean the catch basins. And then I read your email and you said exactly the same
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
wasted an hour of my life reading that.
Yeah, I probably wasted around 35 minutes of it. I knew how to skim really good. I read both studies because the older one was really interesting about how they dredged. So there was something I didn't even know about how they actually did the dredging. So it was pretty
It
interesting.
was kind of there was some interesting tidbits, but there
Yeah.
wasn't any take homes on
No.
what to do at all. No.
And it was cited as recommendations, not as mass DEP requirements. So please keep that in mind. So when you're reading them, it was their suggestion that this is the best practice, but it's not mandated that you sweep the roads nonstop 10 times a year or clean the catch basins. I think they said every quarter. We clean the catch basins every year because that's required in our MS permit. There's no special requirement to be near the mill pond. You have to do it every quarter. We would, if it was full every quarter, we would find a way to clean it, obviously.
Rick, what about you? Did you have any take home feeling about I guess the idea was Glenn wanted to know what can we do so that maybe mitigate having to do this again. It's a very good comment, but there weren't a lot of great pearls of wisdom in there on what to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I didn't have, I think we just have to kind of keep tabs on changes and hope that there aren't substantive changes. And yeah, I don't know what we can do to mitigate on an ongoing basis.
The one thing I did notice is so the little streams that flow into the pond, it mentioned control of the bank. I suppose someone could look at the banks and see if they were eroding and collapsing, and if trees fell over and root systems got into the would then get into the water and certainly contributing to the silting into the pond. But that's it's a pretty non-definitive thing to do, and you're not really supposed to be messing around with flowing bodies of water either. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's inflow from both ends. There's one from the fields up on Pipe Stave.
right,
And then on the other end, was it Beaver Brook, and then, or not Beaver Brook, I mean, Sawmill Brook and some other little flow, I don't know what it's called, come together. But I think there's plenty of space for any solids to drop out in that. So they made some mention of concern about nutrients too, didn't they? Phosphates but I don't know what's upstream of there that's going to cause that. That's going to
and
be
there's
adding nutrients.
probably less. We're not doing corn on the fields there, which was done
Right.
before. So that's maybe less fertilization and getting into right by the parking lot area, going back down into the. So I don't know, but
I found the report interesting that they didn't really comment much about the parking near the house down below, the function hall that we have down below. There is cars allowed to park around that building and on the edge of the water. So if you're really gonna pinpoint a pollutant or a potential pollutant, it'd be parked vehicles 30 feet from the from the pond. That I don't remember seeing in the report, which I found was interesting that they didn't call out maybe not allowing the cars to park. I mean, we don't have to listen to them. It's just a recommendation, but I'm surprised they didn't say that we should keep the cars up in the upper parking lot and not let them come down to the turnaround and park down there. It was not mentioned in that in notice, so it would have been interesting. That's all. If you're trying to diagnose pollutants or runoff, parked cars without curbing near a pond might be a. I just found that interesting. That's why I took the report as face value. I guess I.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, Wayne, is that at our last meeting, there was discussion of the all persons, possible reconfiguration of the area down around the pond, and the creation of an all persons trail, upgrading of the trails there so that they're, accessible to a wheelchair. And one of the things that I think it was Brad talked about was, how, one of the things that we might want to look at is how parking is done, and trying to move cars away from the pond itself. So maybe that that sort of would complement what you just said.
Which is not mentioned in the report. Something that we would do on our own.
Yeah.
With the commission and stuff. So it's just I saw that. I just thought that was interesting. That's all.
Right.
okay, good. Thank you, Wayne.
All right.
Thanks, Wayne.
All right. Everybody have a good night.
You too. So item G, I think I put on an error because as I was going back from my notes, you already voted this change a week ago. So I think we can just skip over item G. It was just to strike those two words that you see referencing the need for insurance.
Okay, yeah. Okay, our next item H is a review of potential town meeting warrant articles. So how do we want to do this? I guess my first comment is I didn't just off the top. Maybe we should discuss any that we feel should not make the cut, so that we don't have to, so that we don't waste the FinCom's time on an article that we don't want to move forward. And having said that, I did not have any that I felt it deserved to at least be evaluated. So that's where I stand. What about you, Rick?
Um, yeah, I agree with that. There wasn't anything that I would immediately think doesn't belong here and that shouldn't be considered. Um, last year we had to cut a lot of articles, because of the concern about having town meeting outside, and that concern about having town meeting outside, despite the fact that we've had two very successful outdoor town meetings, I guess we still have to keep that in mind, as a concern that the weather could prove to not work in our favor. And there's a fair amount of material this time around.
That is true. Just sort of looking at the um, I kind of found that a lot of them would be less. I don't know. It seemed like they would be less contentious than some things in the past. But who know? But having said that, who knows?
Yeah.
Um, Angus, let me ask you one thing about the um, proposed wetlands bylaws. So, have you um, um, broached the idea with the Conservation Commission of having some kind of public meeting where this could be discussed?
I did. When the board took this up last week, you had suggested March 15th as the date. So I did reach out to Don and Judy and Bert. I know the 15th is normally their regular meeting date. So my question to them was whether that date would work if we put this, say, first on the agenda. And I also floated the idea of whether we could potentially start the selectmen's meeting 15 minutes early on March 15th at 6:45. That way, whoever was part of that presentation from the commission could still, could have a full 40 minutes or so before their meeting starts at 7:30. So I did send out a note on that to see if that date would work. It's not confirmed yet, but I did say that the selectmen would like to invite the commission to present the proposed bylaw and the rationale.
Okay.
So if the 15th doesn't work, it looks like, where we kind of staggered our meeting and we're now, it looks like we're on the same calendar as they are with biweekly meetings. So if the 15th doesn't work, we may need to look at a special meeting date for that.
Okay.
One thing I just want to bring up now, so don't forget it. I had put on there the idea of potentially creating a new revolving funds to address revenue and expenses for electric vehicles. There's a second similar article that I would recommend, not on that topic, but on the topic of solid waste. This is something that had come up last year, right around this time, because if we switch to this new contract with hauling, with the barrels, there would be some monies that would be coming and going, both for if people want extra barrels, they would pay extra money to the town, but the town would then pay the vendor. So it would basically be like a revolving fund. And also pickup of bulky waste items would now require a sticker. So there would need to be some accounting mechanism to handle that extra money from the customer and payments to the vendor. So I talked to Stephanie briefly about this, and we both remembered we had talked about it a while back. I do think that if the Board of Health is going to go with this change to the automated pickup for next year, I think we will want to have a revolving fund. So that would be basically along the lines of what I had written up for the it's in this article 20, or I shouldn't say article, it's number 27 on the list of annual town meeting articles. I would think there'd be a similar article to potentially create like a solid waste, hauling and recycling revolving fund, something along those lines.
Angus, would you anticipate that I don't know, if the cost of the additional barrel was $12, would it just be a wash to a strict pass through to the to Mellow? In other words, the town's not trying to make money on this, right? Or
That's how it's been discussed. It's entirely as a pass through. I don't know if we would want to look at some kind of administrative um, fee on top of that, but I think that could be addressed with fees. The idea with this would be that the customer is paying the town, who's then paying Mellow. They're not paying Mellow directly if they want that second barrel.
okay, let's run through some of these just so that um, if we have any sort of particular questions that uh, I don't, a glance at here, and we don't have infinite amount of time to discuss all these articles, but just we might get some a few of them we might have some specific questions on. So on the annual town meeting, let's look at that first. Articles um, one, two, one, two. But just we might get some a few of them we might.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, that was it. That was someone who just joined the meeting. I just muted that person, and they actually just left the meeting. So that's what.
Oh, okay. I thought they were asking a question. Okay.
Just one point about Article 1 on the annual town meeting.
Okay.
Which is the town election. If you want to put the annual town meeting, the annual town election on the annual town meeting, that means the warrant will have to be posted by April 16th for both. But if you could have two warrants, and that means that you could post one for just the election and then have one just for the annual and special town meetings. And that way they wouldn't have to be posted until like May 8th or so.
So, Mike, I've wondered, what is the purpose of having those election of offices on the town meeting warrant? Is that legally required?
It's not legally required. You have to have a warrant because the town election is considered a town meeting. So you have to have a warrant for it. So that's like in any election you have to have a warrant. We sign the warrants for the state primaries, for the November election. All those things have to be posted. If you have your town election within a certain number of days with your town meeting, then you're allowed to put both on the warrant. But the point I'm making is that if you want to put them both on the warrant, you have to obviously post the warrant by the earliest date, which would be 2 weeks prior to, May 3rd, which would be about. I kind of rounded off to April 15th.
Yeah,
The Friday before. So, I mean, so that's a choice we have to do. Is that kind of say, do we want to just do two warrants?
It sounds like that would be easier.
Sure. Yeah. I'm just pointing out the logistics of it. Yeah. It is easier because then you're not, tied to the warrant.
Too soon.
Too soon.
Yeah, well, the alternative might not be possible even, it might not be possible to pull everything together in time. Hey, Mike, this is kind of an academic question, but I feel like I have to ask it. So if the town election is considered to be a town meeting, does it have a quorum requirement? What would ever happen if not enough people showed up to meet a quorum to vote?
It's not to vote on articles though. I think they would say that the quorum requirement is only to vote on articles to see if the town will vote, as opposed to election of officers.
Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
Okay. So Article 2, Article 3, nothing we can discuss at the moment. Article 4, uh, something that can be decided going forward. Same with 5, Water Department budget. Article 6 has the on that one, Angus. Do you know if the water commissioners have discussed that particular recommendation?
Yes, yeah, they made that proposal. And actually, I would point out on Article 17, or I say article, it's not article, it's just a reference number. And I'm saying that partly because Jen Solis is listening, and these aren't the article numbers, it's just for reference. She knows that. So anyhow, what's shown as number 17 is the pipe stave water tank. As a matter of custom, have you would that one also want to go under this water enterprise funds heading? I put it in later, but it occurred to me maybe, should we group all of those together? And I also want to clarify on what's shown as number 17. I wrote water stabilization. In fact, the proposal from water is very clear. They're looking to use water free cash for that. So if you can just make a note of that, that's because they've got about $1 million of free cash, and they're looking to put 500,000 into water stabilization to draw down 270,000 for the pipe stave, and that would still leave them a pretty healthy balance in water free cash.
Oh, I see. Do you want to clump all the water things together?
I think that makes sense. I mean,
I
it's
think
sort
it
of,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of continuity of thought.
Right.
For town meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move that one earlier.
Angus, in Article 7, just from sort of gave me a thought. Do we ever get a annual report from the Essex pension system on how they're doing and all that kind of stuff?
It doesn't. As you mentioned that, I remember you've asked about that before. It doesn't ring a bell, but I'm sure they must issue one, and so we can track that down. But the number that I came up with there is roughly 10% of what our FY22 pension cost is going to be, which is what the DOR policy recommends, is that you put about 10% into the pension liability stabilization annually. But yeah, I'll look into whether there's their investment performance and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, you would think they'd have to put that out.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
I'm sure I've seen it in the past too. Yeah. Maybe it's available on the website even. Okay. So that's certainly a number that I would agree to, but if we're at a budget, and this is a voluntary thing, I would so that anyone listening in said this is not something we have to do. We're going above and beyond to contribute more to our pension liability than is required by the state. So this is a voluntary thing to reduce our liability. It's good for our bond rating. It's good for the long-term fiscal health of the town. But if we're in a situation where the budget is extremely tight, maybe we have to cut that. That's all. Or a certain percentage of that. And the same holds for adding to our OPEB. because of the demographics of our workforce and the changes in the way our pension liability has been analyzed, we now do have a small deficit in our OPEB um, account, a deficit in terms of funding, future funding deficit. However, it's still probably the most funded account percentage-wise of um, any town in the Commonwealth. So it's not like we're in trouble, but if we wanted to have no deficit whatsoever, we have to put something in that particular. And that's something again that's completely voluntary. If we're in a position like we were last year, where the budget after when we get closer to the end on how the budget is doing, if that's really a lot, we may have to forego that again this year.
So in both cases here, what we're doing though is we're really we're preventing the town from having a liability in the future for our employment of people today.
Exactly, and I mean, and it's hopefully the principle of compound interest. If we're saving now, we're saving the future better.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of cities and towns don't have that, aren't fortunate enough to have that capability even. So, Article 9, that's going to be something that we'll discuss. How much do we want to take out of the um, school building stabilization fund? And I'm good with that number, but we'll have, that's something that we're all going to have to think about. So Angus, the you gave me a couple of different numbers on what, I mean, it's all close, but in terms of the investment returns on the account, the second you gave me some numbers yesterday that, and then you gave me an updated number today that was actually lower, which didn't make, it should be, if anything, it should be higher. It didn't make any sense. What's actually in the account right now?
Yeah. Okay. So that's, let's see if I'm following you. I
Like
think
you just had what you gave me today was just the June 30th, and things have probably gained, the stock market's gone up and everything's, it should be better than June 30th now, I would think.
yeah,
It's not worth worrying about it now, but it's not, it is when you have $2 million invested, it does create a little bit of more money. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So the part of it is, so this is the first year that we voted to transfer funds out of stabilization. So that was the 328.6.
Right.
And so,
has that actually been done yet or not?
well, that's where I'm going. So some of that, the 89,000 and some change that was voted in October, Sue did make that transfer before she retired, but that leaves another roughly 240 that was voted last June. That transfer has not yet been made, so that money is still sitting in the investment portfolio. And I met with Caitlin earlier today, and we agreed it makes sense to leave it there until June and to transfer it out only toward closer to the end of the fiscal year, because that way it'll still show up in the fiscal year end as having been transferred out properly, but it will sit in that account for another several months and gain more investment income.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Article 10, septic, we don't need to talk about that.
I believe this is the last year of debt service on that.
Really? Okay.
I think so.
Then it's worth talking about. This is our last chance.
I've managed to not ever have to talk about that at town meeting, and I'm going to keep that. It's hard to say septic loan revolving account like 10 times in the article. It's as much as so the CIC voted to put 700,000 in the from free cash into stabilization. So do you want to talk
So-
a little bit about that, Angus? Okay.
Yeah, so part of that, so they were aware that our intent was to propose 600,000 for the Middle Street Bridge, because since that hasn't really been accounted for over the years in the capital program, it's kind of understood that that isn't built into the, assumptions of why they've put certain amounts in over the years.
Right.
So 600,000 was kind of the baseline. So the capital committee recommended adding basically 100,000 to that.
So this is the 600 plus 1.
Correct.
So it isn't like there's this and the 600.
Correct. But I have included in the draft operating budget 500,000. So if that went forward, there'd be a total of 1.2 million going into stabilization. 500,000 would be from raise and appropriate because it's in the operating budget, and 700,000 would be a free cash transfer.
Okay,
But of that 600,000,
100? What's the thinking on that?
Of the extra 100?
Yes.
Rick was at the meeting too, so he can chip in, but I don't think it was driven by a specific project so much as intended as a acknowledgement that there are some major capital needs coming down the pike between not just the bridge, but the Page School and some fire equipment, some trucks that are coming due for replacement. And it was basically intended as kind of a heads up to town meeting voters that there are some pretty costly items coming down the road, and to start that process of increasing the amount to set aside for stabilization.
But that's going in, if we have a number that sort of fits in all the spreadsheet, what number makes it work? Do we need this to make the number work? I guess that's the question. Or are we just being extra cautious?
well,
In
Archie,
other
what,
words, if we don't put the 100, do we start going into a deficit in 3 years or something, or what?
yeah, that's essentially what's going to happen, is because there are substantial capital needs coming up over the course of the next several years.
Yeah, but how many years? 10 or 3?
No, I think it's 2, 3, 4 years in
Okay.
that time frame. So it's an effort to begin to build somewhat greater capital buffer, so that we're ready for those capital needs, so that we don't come up against a wall.
Okay. I mean, it has to be, if we're doing this, the language has to be more definitive than that at town meeting.
Okay. Yep. Makes sense. No, and we had agreed at the last CIC meeting that there was a good couple of spreadsheet lines that have been used previously that aren't in the current capital spreadsheet. But essentially, what they do is project out. They account for all the itemized listings and project out what the capital needs will be out in several years, making assumptions about how much we put in each year. And that, I think, will make it clearer. So did I say that right, Angus? Does that make sense?
You did. Yeah. There's basically, we've got a working draft of exactly what Rick's describing, because we've made a lot of progress on really retooling the capital program on the expenses side. But the one piece we haven't fully integrated is the revenue side, which had been part of the stabilization table over the years. So we do have a draft of that. but it wasn't ready for last week's meeting. I just didn't have the time. It's a few hours of work to really do that, and so we just didn't have the time. But we're working on that, and we want to have that for the next, ideally for the next capital meeting in a month or so. We should have that, and that will show exactly what you're talking about, Archie. Of in what year, if we fund everything according to the program, in what year would we start to run out of money?
Okay. All right, Article 12, that's pro forma, not much we have to say about that. So-called Article 13, at the moment, 25,000 for Phase 3 of the historical property surveys. So that was
Just-
approved by the CPC?
Yeah, that was recommended by the CPC, and the expectation is that we would, we sure hope we would get a grant for half of that amount, as we have in the first two rounds. So the net expense would be 12.5, but we have to appropriate the full amount because we won't know if we get that grant.
So the trail has not been evaluated, approved yet, right?
They started, but yeah, they continued that. And one of the big questions that came up was, let's say they don't get the other grant that they went after. And let's say they only got the CPC funding for 30 and not have the full 60. What could they get done for the 30? So that's basically what the proponents are going to present at the next CPC meeting. And then CPC can decide, do they want to fund it based on what they would get if it's not a match by a grant.
Okay. Next one, a CPC, potential CPC article, 175,000 for acquisition of 30 acres and a conservation restrictions on 21 additional acres off of Coffin Street. So when I did a little research on this, so just apropos of, I just think the numbers are important. Bear with me 1 second. Here we go. So if we don't know exactly what the purchases of the land paid, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 875,000. So if the town, and that's for 81 total acres. So if the town purchased 30 of those acres, that's 37% of the total acreage of the property. I looked up what are landlocked pieces of property, how do they appraise versus other pieces of property of a similar nature. And the consensus, and I looked at a lot of different real estate websites and things about landlocked acreage. And their feeling was that landlocked acreage would go for anywhere between 20 and 30% of a normal of a similar property that had frontage and had good accessibility. So if you take if we take as a number that the property, we don't know exactly, but if we take just as a figure that the Coffin Street property was purchased for 875,000, and we multiply that by the amount of the percentage that of those 81 acres that the town would acquire, namely 30 acres, that's 37% of the total acreage. And then if we multiply 875,000 by 30%, and then multiply it again by the reduction in value that it's land, because it's landlocked, I come out with a number. If it's 20%, it's approximately 65,000. At 30%, it's 97,000, which is still less than what is considerably less than what's being requested here. On top of that, the purchase price of 875,000, the land that the town would be getting, besides it being landlocked, is also the least desirable of the acreage of any of it, because because it is landlocked, and B, because it's on the side of a hill and there's a lot of wetlands. It really is not particularly, in most cases, valuable land for anything. And the town cannot purchase land that they can't pay more than the appraised value of the property. So I guess my take-home message is Greenbelt is going to get an appraisal of this property, but Greenbelt wants to buy this property, wants to acquire this, wants the town to acquire this property, and wants to uh, get the conservation permanent conservation restriction on the other acreage. So do we are we getting an appraisal from somebody that wants to purchase, versus we're going to be putting a lot of money, more than Greenbelt in this case, into this purchase? And from just my back of the envelope kind of calculations, the amount of money being requested here is dramatically more than what it might be worth. So
Yeah. I see your train of thought, and I can't disagree with that, Archie. Yeah, I also think it's interesting. I didn't have time to scan through exactly what they say about their plan, if they say anything more about their plan for the balance of the land. But there was earlier an intention to potentially cut a couple of lots out, um, which obviously represents the prime, in terms of real estate value, the prime value of the land. And so the LLC, or some members of the LLC, would essentially, be recouping somewhere between probably and $400,000 of value, um,
at least, yeah.
from creation of a couple of building lots. Um, yeah,
So my reasoning is just another thing for us to, even if we were gung ho about it, without which I'm not, but 175 sounds way high. Okay, and so the CPC may not, it may not even get beyond there. So
yeah, we'll see how that goes. There's also the issue, an ongoing question about potential parking, and I don't think there's any resolution to that for that at this point. But as has been discussed earlier, if um, it's great if it's a new piece of open space, but if it's being paid for with public money and it has no reasonable public access, then it's hard to,
it's hard to justify.
it's
Yeah.
hard to justify, right?
Okay. So, Angus, you want to explain the debt service article for the the car post?
So the town meeting voters in November of last year, of 2019, when the Soldiers and Sailors building was approved, it included authorization to borrow up to 1.25 million for the restoration of that building. At this point, we're in the design phase, and we're funding that out of the 250,000 that was part of that article that was not borrowed. But in the event that we go out to bid and we get responses that are within budget, the town has the authorization to borrow to fund that project. So this article that you see in front of you would be a standing article for basically each of the next 20 years to authorize the payment of the debt service associated with that borrowing.
Okay.
Now, sitting here today, we don't.
Approximately 1 year's.
That's right, approximately 1 year of debt service. So we don't know sitting here today if we're going to be in a position to go out for financing next year. But that's the goal is, and so if we do go out to bid, this would allow us to borrow the money that we would need to sign a construction contract.
Okay. It seems like, at least for the moment, from listening to what the federal government is, the Federal Reserve and so forth, interest rates may not go up, at least in the short term, again for another year or two. So us waiting on borrowing has not hurt us in any fashion.
So as you know, as of today, we have not issued any debt or incurred any debt service for that.
So Angus, you have, okay. So Article 18, so we talked about the water tank. Article 18, you have 600,000 there for the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
But you said the other one was 600 plus 1.
The 600 plus 1 would be to transfer from free cash into stabilization. This one here is to authorize expenditure out of stabilization.
Oh, okay.
So, in the old days, I mean, you could just fund it from free cash and cut out the middleman, but there's accounting and audit trail reasons why, we recommend to do it the way we propose, to put it into stabilization and then authorize it out of stabilization.
Okay.
You do run the risk though of needing a 2/3 vote out of stabilization.
Mike, let's say, just for the sake of discussion, let's say this came up at town meeting and got a majority but fell short of a 2/3. Would it be in order for someone to propose a motion to reconsider and in a revised motion change the funding source from stabilization to free cash?
Well, normally when we write them, we say from available funds
Right.
in the article. So if a motion to take it out of the stabilization fund was defeated, then someone could ask for a second motion, a changing motion to have it taken out of free cash.
Except the money's already been, if the other article should be after this, because you've already put it in stabilization. So the other article should come after this.
You'd have to then make a motion to reconsider the previous article,
Right.
in order to do it. Which Parliamentary is, you know, you'd have to have some people who are astute on parliamentary procedure
And
to do that.
yeah, so Mike, in order to reconsider that article, it would have to be somebody who had voted along uh, the line that prevailed, had been in the prevailing vote, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so all right.
But I mean, Archie's comment is something to maybe consider a little bit,
Yeah,
because we have the money in the stabilization fund now to fund it. And so if it was voted prior to putting more money in, it would you know, wouldn't cause a deficit. But and then you could vote money into the stabilization.
We can put those articles back to back so that in the town meeting discussion that we keep everyone focused on that topic and not have to jump around.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say on the bridge, there are some, we're proceeding as if we're going to be in a position to award a construction contract this season, but you should be aware, as I think you are, that there are some variables there, both, relative to permitting and design, but also, Newburyport committing its share of funds, which would be necessary to award a construction contract.
Angus, how are we doing on the design money? How much is getting burned through on that?
I haven't. Let's see. I mean, actually, Stephanie's on the line. She may be able to pull up the last MassWorks report. Every time we submit an invoice, which we do every month, we have to provide a report to MassWorks of what is expended against the total grant amount. So I do the reports, I sign the reports, but I don't remember what number I put in the last one a couple of weeks ago. So we did just get the money back today. I know that. So far, we're on track with what we budgeted for design.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay, it's somewhere.
So, Rick, a lot of these next articles are all CIC items.
Actually, no, I've got it right here. So our design engineering budget under MassWorks. So
64.
Yeah, is 150 was the budget requested to date was 64. The last invoice was almost 20,000, so that's up to like 84. So the remaining design engineering budget is about 66,000. But keep in mind, this is only the MassWorks grant. There's also a Mass DOT small bridge grant,
Right.
Newburyport administers. So that's not necessarily a complete statement of cost. That's just what we've incurred.
Yeah, Archie, you mentioned these are CIC.
Yeah. So these all seem reasonable.
Yeah, we rated all of them, and there is I guess a relative schedule of how we rated them all, but these were all expenditures that CIC believes are necessary and prudent.
There is one potential change on that one, Archie, that's been talked about at CIC, and the Board of Fire Engineers actually met earlier tonight. So I'll hear from Chief Dwyer tomorrow in terms of what direction they want to go. But if you look at the capital program, you'll see the 500,000 tanker truck, but you'll also see in the next year or two another 500,000 as a pumper truck. And so there has been discussion with Chief Dwyer that there could be, or there is, a single vehicle that's more $700,000 or $800,000 that could serve in lieu of both trucks. And so it would be a bigger hit in the near term, but in the long term, it would mean one large vehicle instead of two. So the Board of Fire Engineers posted a meeting for tonight at, I believe, 7, and he was going to review that with his board as to whether they were, agreeable to that. But if they are, there is a scenario where we go back to CIC and say, to either propose to increase that amount for next year, or more likely to table it till next year and to propose the larger, more expensive vehicle next year.
Yeah. One of the things to point out about that is, the Board of Fire Engineers needs to get to a consensus on whether or not one tanker, a pumper tanker, but the tanker is the key word there, whether one tanker is adequate to the needs of the town, because so much of the town is not covered by hydrants. In the case of much of town, you have to truck all your water in, or you have to truck it to the site, and the question is one tanker truck adequate to the task? And there, we do have mutual aid agreements, so that's up to the Board of Fire Engineers to think through and determine what they think is adequate.
Rick, was there any feeling that, from what you said, would they keep the old tanker then and get a new one also?
I don't think so. I think the old tanker, that's a good, I don't think we talked about that, or I don't recall talking about that explicitly, but I think the old tanker is pretty much beyond its, or it's, near or beyond its usable life. And there was some concern too, about being able to climb some of the hills in town with with a load of water.
Okay.
Think of think of trying to go up Archelaus, or oh boy, I'm drawing a blank, over off of Ash Street.
Your Hill.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of hills in town where, trying to imagine what has become a clunker tanker, try, carrying 1,500 gallons, another 8 or 10 tons weight, besides its own weight of water, that is, besides its own.
Okay. So, Angus, will we be able to? Well, I guess we will. So if they change their mind on things, will we be able to get that resolved, or you think we'll just punt on it for this year then?
I don't want to obviously speak for Chief Dwyer or the Board of Fire Engineers. My guess is that if they decided that the larger truck was going to meet the needs of the town more cost effectively, it sounds like they might be okay postponing that. I think it would be tough at this point to go back to CIC. They've already had a number of meetings and gone all through their process, and I'm not sure that they even would want to entertain a substantial revision like that this late in the process. So if anything, that could result in the one you see before you falling off the warrant.
Okay. 22 is funds for 2 interns to identify invasive species on the public lands. Rick, my only question is, how do you suppose this gets approved? I would think it would, but how do we find the people?
So we need to advertise for the people, and this actually came up in a fairly recent conversation I had with one of the sort of primary people that have proposed this originally, and there's concern. The goal was to do this summer, But there's concern that the timing of town meeting being when it is, that we really will not be able to advertise.
Rick, I think we lost you.
Rick, you're not, you're moving. I hope it wasn't an invasive species.
Just a point for him is that if it's on the annual town meeting warrant, it wouldn't be available until July 1st anyways.
Oh, right. So this is one that really ought to be on the special.
If you wanted it to be
Yeah.
available right away.
Yeah. Okay, here comes Rick again.
Sorry about that. I don't know if I can get my video. I'm having trouble holding on to a connection for some reason. Can you hear me okay?
We
Fine.
can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I dropped out suddenly there. Yeah, so the thought is the timing, the actual timing of the internship. So Nancy thinks that we might be able to actually get, instead of doing it during the week, during the summer, hire the people on weekends in the fall, which is actually still a good time, particularly if you're treating certain plants. If you're trying to, besides just identifying, if you're actually trying to treat certain plants or certain plants that you're best dealing with in the fall, or even stretching it out till the following summer, but funding it now so that funds are available next year. Yeah, this is obviously this is a new idea, new sort of a new strategy for the town, and we're trying to figure out, based on availability of funding, the best way to actually do it at this point. So I know that's a little vague, and I apologize for that, but.
Rick, I think, you and I had talked, I think a week or so ago you could advertise the internships earlier than May 22nd, as long as it said, subject to
approval.
funding. Yeah, you couldn't hire someone till after May 22nd.
Right, and I that's what I had proposed. By the way, my audio or my video isn't working. I don't know what the problem is here, but so that's I had discussed that with Nancy, and she quite honestly wasn't comfortable with that because, well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. She's not comfortable with doing that because of the people that we're offering these jobs to are students who have a limited window of opportunity to get their best job for the summer. And she was not comfortable with the idea of offering them a position and then potentially that position not coming to fruition.
No, you couldn't offer it. You could advertise it and get applicants and then just not make an offer until after May 22nd.
Okay, so yeah, so back, maybe I wasn't clear before. Essentially, Nancy has run a number of she on an ongoing basis runs internship programs on the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. I think she has a handful this summer, and her experience is that the people that you really want to have, you need to be offering them a position like in the next month or so. You know, the people who are really after this type of position and are invested in it are looking early so that they have things set up well in front of the summer. And you know, so she doesn't believe that if you can't offer them a position, you know, by sometime in April, you're not going to get the people that you really want. Yeah, I kind of ran through that multiple times, Angus, but Nancy was pretty steadfast in her perspective on you know, the availability of the best candidates.
Rick, I still kind of agree with your viewpoint that I don't see why we couldn't advertise it ahead of time. And there's always a hard there's always more people waiting there's always more candidates for things like this than there are openings, it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my take on it too. Well, you know, I mean, at this point, you know, my thought would be to forge ahead, and I, you know, I'll have another. I'll talk with Nancy again, and you know, we're sort of depending upon her expertise and experience in doing this to, you know, to make sure we do it in a way where we get the most bang for the buck, because, you know, the goal is to get as much benefit as we can from the effort and from the money.
Okay, I would say we should keep at it too. Yeah. Okay. The next article is a vote to accept as a public way Cortland Lane.
Oh, the free cash transfer for the tax rate.
Did I skip that? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So we should wait to see what's going on for that.
Yeah. I mean, my recommendation would be to leave it on as a placeholder. Once we're further along with the budget process, we can give an estimate of what that would, you know, how that would affect the tax rate, and you can decide at that point whether you want to fill in a number on that or potentially leave it off the warrant altogether. But I think leaving it on as a placeholder with no number is probably a smart move at this point.
Yes.
And then, yeah, as you said, the next one after that's Cortland Lane. This one, you may know this, you both may know this already, but you know, it was voted by town meeting to accept it as a public way. There's a street acceptance plan on file, but that for reasons we're not totally clear on, that was never brought to record. It was never recorded at the registry, and the deed that conveyed the lands. There's a confirmatory deed we have on file we have the original from 2010. That was never recorded. So legally, that's still not officially public. So the recommendation is that, and when we can no longer rely on that 2006, I believe it was, town meeting vote.
Well, that's going to be my question. So that's not valid anymore, or?
No, it's once that's voted, you have to actually record the acceptance within 120 days.
Okay.
So we, as it turns out, Mike McCarron, prior to his tenure with the town, had represented the developer for this subdivision. So we did have to confer with outside counsel on some of this, since Mike is conflicted. So their advice after reviewing all of the materials was that we would need a new vote of town meeting. And so the language that you have was provided by KP Law.
Okay.
And then we would find out whether we may be able to rely on that deed, because we do have the original from 2010. but I'm told it depends who you get at the registry in terms of whether they'll accept that or not. So we may, need a new conveyance in addition to a new vote, but we don't know that yet.
And the conveyance would be from the developer, from Ed Hill, or whatever the name of his his company was?
I'm not sure about that, whether it would be from him or whether it would be from current, from the homeowners.
Or from homeowners association.
There's nothing on file where it was ever conveyed from Ed Hill.
Yeah.
Homeowners Association.
So is the street being plowed and so forth now?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's been treated as public ever since that vote. And we confirmed with Gary Bill that, to his recollection, they started snow operations, after town meeting voted to accept it. And I don't think he was aware it had never formally been brought to record. So we don't know why that didn't happen. So I see this as a housekeeping item.
No, it wasn't. It didn't. Double negative. It didn't not happen because there was some kind of controversy. It was just some kind of oversight.
That's the best of my understanding. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I talked with so I know I believe at least that Wendy Reed and Leah Zambardini, the planner, had spent some time digging through the old records in the planning office, and it sounds like from what they found, and Angus, you probably know a lot more about this than me, but it sounded like it was an oversight that for some reason somebody dropped a ball, and I don't think we'll ever figure out exactly who or how. How do we, or when would we know, Angus, whether the conveyance was or would need to be from the original developer or from the homeowners association? Is the road, if it's not in the ownership of the town, the road and this right of way, if it's not in the ownership of the town, are they both then in the ownership of the homeowners association?
By both, what do you mean?
Well, I say both. Maybe they're one and the same. Is it the roadway and the right of way? Are they one and the same parcel? I guess that's probably shown on the map as a single parcel.
Well, they are, but there is this, the roadway layout does extend past the cul-de-sac, so it's past the actual extent of the pavement. There's that L shape. This is on page 35 of the supplemental packet.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's that parcel that you see, that road layout with that L at the end, is what is described in the street acceptance plan and the deed.
Okay. So, in fact, in order for the town to continue to maintain that land, it has to become town property, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And yeah, to your question, I'm not sure that the sense I've got in terms of when we would know if we could rely on that deed, let's say town meeting votes to accept the road. I think the next step would be we would bring to the registry the street acceptance plan and the deed, and they would either see that as acceptable or they wouldn't. And if they didn't, we'd then, I don't know if we can find out before we actually bring it to record it. I don't know if we can get an opinion from someone at the registry as to whether whether it's suitable for recording.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if Jane Wild used to work at the registry for years. I'm guessing she's retired at this point, but I wonder if she'd have any thoughts on it.
So I did get a note from the attorney who's helping with us on this. She said, I will send I had asked her the specific question, is your office able to get an idea from the registry of whether this would be sufficient to record the conveyance upon a town meeting vote prior to such a vote, or would we only find out once we try to go to record it after a town meeting vote to accept? And she responded, I will send the attached, which was a scan of the conveyance, to my title examiner to check if they can get someone at the registry to pre-approve it. If she tells me that's not possible, we would have to try recording it. She goes on to say towns have 120 days from the close of the town meeting at which the street was accepted to acquire rights in the way. So the prior town meeting vote is no longer effective. So that was last Tuesday, so 6 days ago. So she is looking into that question.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay. Next one. To establish a bylaw in order to establish a new dog waste disposal bylaw. No comment. I guess you saw the resident complaint that came in today, so I'm not the only person that's worked up about this. But we have to how I would ask this, and not now, but ask Mike this, how much we have to flesh this out ahead of time before it gets passed, or do we just need the authorization to do so?
No, you have to vote on the actual wording of the bylaw.
Okay.
That the town will vote this bylaw. You can't. The article can be just a general article, saying what what you intend to present, but the motion must be the actual wording.
So
does that wording need to include the dollar amount?
If we were going to have fines, exactly, would we have to have the exact amount?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So the draft that we put together last spring around this time is in your packet from, and that has the fines in it. Mike, instead of that, could we have the bylaw authorize the adoption of a fine schedule to allow to be a little bit more nimble if the board wanted to change fines over time rather than locking it in with the bylaw?
I don't think so. I think that the establishment for something like this, I think that it's town meeting that establishes the fines.
Okay.
Different fines are established by different,
No, but Mike, like we decided to make the parking fine at Pipestave a certain amount. We didn't have to make that a bylaw. So
because that was under your authority as the control of streets and ways for parking. Different fines come from different
okay.
different sections. This type of fine is something that comes from a bylaw.
Okay. Okay. Article 20, potential Article 26, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 62A, to authorize the treasurer into payment agreements with persons entitled to redeem parcels in tax title. So, sort of the same question. Do we have to state this very specifically, or is this enough?
No, all you have to do is accept the provisions of the act.
Okay.
So this is the one you probably remember we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And in practice, the treasurer over.
Right.
Yeah, so I think this would be a good housekeeping one.
As long I can see people talking a lot about this one, if they think, well, some people are going to get a good deal and other people aren't, we have to like make sure that there isn't, that people don't get the idea that this is actually better because it's defining exactly what can be done.
Right, and you know, I think once people understand that they remain in tax title, it just is the town won't foreclose on them as long as they meet the payment agreement. So, but you're right, we need to make that really clear so people don't think that anyone's getting any kind of unfair treatment.
No favor.
They're paying their full taxes. They're just, the town's just agreeing not to foreclose on them while they make payments.
Well, apparently, I mean, based on this, they can also waive up to 50%, not more than 50% of the interest. Right.
But that's sort of the prerogative, right? It doesn't have to be waived.
Right, it's a prerogative between the treasurer and persons entitled to redeem parcels of tax title. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and in any event, you know, it's better all the way around. Even if the interest is cut by 50%, it's better that the taxes be paid up than the town have to try to foreclose on the property and take it.
Absolutely, and this defines things. It makes it so that no one can be accused of favoritism or anything. It's
Right.
good. I mean,
Right.
we have to get this passed. It's good.
Yep. Yeah.
One thing I'll say just in practice, I mean, the statute provides for a repayment agreement up to 5 years. I've never seen one more than 2 years. I mean, maybe you would go to 3. I can't really imagine you go to 5. So, you know, it does say no more than 5 years or such lesser period as the ordinance or bylaw may specify. I don't know if we want to make it more restrictive than the statute.
Well, I guess that's my question. Do we want to define things more or just leave it? Mike says to accept the provisions, but do we then have to define it more?
Seems to me we'd be best off, you know, not reinventing the wheel and just going with the state, you know, the state wording, the state's regulation. I don't know.
Yeah. Angus, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, we've got the draft financial policy that has a section that if this is adopted, we can add to that. That does give some guidance to the treasurer on how these would be structured. But, you know, where it's referencing in the statute, you know, ordinance or bylaw, I think it's worth asking around. I can see if Caitlin can check with her treasurer colleagues in other towns to see if they have bylaws that add more framework than this. No reason not to look at that.
Okay.
I mean, you know, if it allows up to 5 years, it doesn't, you know, 5 years or such lesser period. It doesn't mean that we ever would go or need to go to 5 years, but maybe allowing ourselves latitude. You know, maybe we establish a policy that with certain exceptions is, you know, establishes a 2 or 3 year period of repayment. Mm-hmm. So what's the default interest rate? Is it 12%? That's
once it goes to tax title, it actually goes to a higher percentage. I want to say, is it 14%?
14% sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, next one, basically to establish a revolving fund for the revenues collected for the EV charging stations on town property. Pretty straightforward. We've done this with a lot of other revolving funds.
And I know I mentioned this earlier, but just to say it again, I think we ought to, at least for a placeholder, have the same kind of language for a solid waste revolving fund, so that we have a vehicle to handle monies in and out to do with customers getting extra barrels, as well as the bulky waste item stickers.
Okay.
So I'll work with Paul and with Mike on what the actual language will be, but it will look similar to what you see as number 27.
28 is
Archie,
Go
just to back up for a second there, on that last one, Angus, if there is a revolving fund set up, I wonder if it would make sense from sort of looking out in the future to make sure that it wouldn't preclude using that same revolving fund for containers that at some point in the future, if state requirements change, could be used for food waste compost containers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know. I mean, I guess I didn't see the article, but I understand that there was an article in the Globe the other day about the town of Hamilton is imposing mandatory food waste composting, and you know, food waste composting collection. And I'm not suggesting that that's something that we would decide to do here on our own, but just in the event that it does become something that we're mandated to do in the future, if that fund was capable, that same fund was capable of receiving those funds, seeing as it all would fall into the solid waste category.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Good.
Article 28 just establishes limits of expenditures from several revolving funds, such as the police vehicle revolving fund. So that's pretty a routine. Happens every year.
Angus, would you want to include in, you know, the new ones in
Yes.
the amount there?
Yep.
How will you know what you'll spend on especially on the solid waste one, until we've done it for a year?
But it's an
That's
amount.
a tough one.
Yeah, but it's only an amount. It can be any amount. It doesn't mean that money is appropriated. It just
Right,
means
right.
that's the amount that you can spend. If you don't get it, you can't spend it.
Okay. So think high.
They don't make revolving fund credit cards, Mike?
And additionally, is that even though you set an amount at town meeting, if you find that you're running, you know, you need more to get more, the Board of Selectmen has the power during the year to increase the amount. So if you schedule something for, if you say $30,000 and you collect 60,000, and you want to spend some of that in the revolving fund for whatever purpose, you can, with a vote of the Board of Selectmen, increase the 30,000 to something more.
Okay. Final one we talked about was establishing a new wetlands protection bylaw. So we've discussed that, and can go on.
Okay, and I will say I listed it in the special town meeting list, but it should be at the end of this list, which is the citizen petition, because the number of signatures, 10 signatures, is enough to get you on the annual, but not on the special. So right now that's listed as item 15 on the special, but that ought to be considered an annual article.
Okay. So if you have more, you get it on the special?
You need 100 signatures to get it on a special.
Okay. Oh, in other words, you could have a one-off special at any time then. Yeah, okay.
Well, to call a special, you need 200 signatures.
Oh, okay.
To put an article on a called special, you need 100.
Okay. Just Angus, in relation to that, will the citizen petition article, would that have any impact on before it was voted? Would that have any impact on any discussions you might have with potential funding source, bonding sources? Would you have to state that this article was on the warrant, but it hadn't been passed, but it was on the warrant?
Yeah, so I would say I know Mike just obviously we just came in late last week, and Mike was able to certify earlier today that the signatures are valid. He hasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I don't believe he's completed and maybe not even really begun in a serious way his kind of separate review as town council as to what the legal impact of this article would be if it passed. If he advised or council advised that it would have any effect, then yes, we would need to disclose the article in any potential, bond issuance. But I'm not sure if it would have any legal effect, even if it did pass. I think we would disclose it anyway, but
Okay. I just threw that out. I have no,
Yeah.
I don't. Okay. Are we good with everything on the annual for the moment?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, the next article is the next one is a CIC approved request for funding for the fire alarm. So as I understand it, this was some additional expense that was not covered by the previous funding for this. That I don't know. There was just more costly than expected. Is that?
Well, I think what happened, and Angus, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happened was that when the original costing was done, it wasn't understood that the work was actually going to have to take place outside of normal business hours because of school. So the cost of installing or of doing what has been done up to this point was higher than had been projected, and then so what they did is they broke out the sort of a master panel, moving a master panel from somewhere downstairs, relatively inaccessible, up to the front entranceway or the main entranceway to the building, and which is where it would be assuming this, which was where it will be moved to, and assuming that this article passes. So this article essentially, all of the other components of the system are will be in place, but this completes the movement of this main control panel.
Okay, so basically the other than the movement of this, the
System's
the
function.
new system is functioning, correct?
Or will be functioning, yeah. Yeah.
No, it is what I'm saying. It is, or
Or it will be. The work's not complete yet,
okay.
but it will be by town meeting.
And I think that's the reason why this one is on the special town meeting instead of on the annual town meeting, is because they want to roll it into the same flow, while they're installing the rest of the system,
Okay.
Sure.
including the rest of the system.
Yep.
Next one, 105,000 for painting restoration of the town hall. The CPC has approved that.
Yes.
Any comments? Okay. Next one, 30,000 for a whetstone, a gateway, a path, continuation of a trail between a river meadow and Sullivan's Court extension. The CPC did approve that.
Yeah, so that originally, the original plan when the Sullivan's Court extension was done was that the developer was going to be building a connecting path over to River Meadow, but it was only funded with $10,000, and I don't know. From what I saw, it was all pretty ambiguous. There was reference to it being ADA compliant pathway, but the question is, what was actually going to be ADA compliant? Was it just was it the entire pathway? Did it include bridges? Because there's a stream and then another wet area that have to be crossed by bridges. So the entire cost of this is projected, I think, at $40,000, and $10,000 of that is to be funded by the money provided by the developer, and the other 30 is this article. So this is what it actually turns out to be, and it after a lot of backing and forthing, I don't think there was any recourse, to go back and force the developer to to build a compliant, an all-person accessible path.
Having ridden my bike over there a few times, it does seem like a lot of money. That's all I can say. $40,000. It's not very far, and it's I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
there are two
actually do it cheaper. I mean, that just seems. I hope that's an overly high estimate.
I hope so too. I'm not, we have been assured that it is adequate. Whether or not it's, excessively high, I don't know. But, if it costs less, then we're not going to spend more. We're not, we'll spend no more than the amount allocated, or the town will spend no more than the amount allocated, and hopefully less.
Where did this bid come from?
Brad Boucher put the numbers together. This is and as a volunteer, but this is in line with what he does for a living.
Okay.
Did you have any further thoughts there, Angus? Does that sound all?
No, I agree with everything you said. I would say I have my own questions as to whether the cost, if actually, I mean, I think it could be higher, but that because there's not a plan. One of the big bone of contentions between the developer and Concom over the many years is they were looking for him to provide a more specific plan of exactly what was going to be built to get through the order of conditions, the notice of intent process. And he would never do that. And, and to this point that we haven't seen any plan. And I kind of curious once there's actually a plan, does the scope potentially increase beyond what's shown here?
Okay.
It's not very far.
It's somewhere between 670, 750 feet. From the end of the cul-de-sac to the entrance onto the River Meadow Road.
Okay, if you included the whole thing, okay.
Yeah. Because I mean, it doesn't make sense to have an accessible trail in the middle, but the ends aren't accessible. That doesn't do you a whole lot of good. It has to continue all the way through. But in my personal opinion, this is a good connection between neighborhoods. That for a variety of purposes and a variety of groups of people. Both for kids and if there are people of any age that need accessible routes. This is a good way to expand somebody's horizon beyond their small neighborhood.
No, I agree. When people are talking about bridges and stuff, like I say, I rode my bike across it, so it can't be that. It's not that wet.
Yeah. It depends upon the time of the year, I think.
Okay. Snow and ice deficit. Okay. Next one after that is Essex Agricultural Technical High School fiscal 2021 budget. So what's up with that, Angus?
So that's the transportation costs associated with the two students who attend there. During the budgeting process, we were given a per pupil number, and they didn't say that doesn't include transport. So it wasn't until we got the invoice and we said, so going forward for FY22, I'm carrying about $1,500 per projected pupil for transportation, which is separately.
Okay. Is that a new thing? Because I don't remember them ever doing that before.
I don't know how it was reported, in the past. I did notice, I was looking through some old town meeting records earlier today to do with that school stabilization, and I did see something from 3 or 4 years ago, some supplemental appropriation for Essex Ag. I didn't go back.
Just like we only appropriated for one student and there were 3 or that kind of thing.
No, it was something like $2,000 or $3,000. It wasn't, because it's on a per pupil, it's about 17,500, and even a few years ago it would have been 15. So it was a relatively small number. It was 3,000. So I don't know if that was the same thing, but that's what that amount is.
Okay. So I have no idea what this next item is. Okay.
Yeah, without Stephanie on the line, I would hesitate to get into it, because there's it's just one of these loose ends she's trying to tie up that's been on the books for a number of years, and it shows up on our free cash, and it looks like, at some point there was no, over expenditure of this account by $287.57, and the only way to.
But why would we have spent that even 5 years ago?
I don't think that's clear, Archie, based on
something just
based on what Stephanie put together.
Inadvertently, it was that account was charged rather than some other account, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it almost looks like it could have been somebody clicked on the wrong account number.
Yeah.
Does Angus? I know that this is something Stephanie's really looked at, but I've been trying to figure out just the World War II Gym Stabilization Fund. Do we have any idea what that is? Is that is the annex, when was that built? It's not that structure. What structure is it, I wonder? What is the World War II gym?
Mike, do you know?
In the town meeting of 1946, the town had sold a piece of property, and the purpose was to build a gym in, that was going to be a memorial to the veterans of World War II. They appropriated some money, but they took the money from the sale of the land and they appropriated, I think, like $75, and basically nothing ever got done. So at some point along the line, they spent it for something else. Sometime between 1946 and now.
So $75 today would buy you the doorknob for the front door.
Well, that's how much. I mean, they actually got
Really?
like they got like $500 or something like that. Which with the sale of the land, it's. Angus, you had the materials. Was that in the packet?
It was, yeah. But it didn't speak to the specific question that Rick asked about,
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't want to waste our time. I guess I just curious.
It was interesting to see the amounts on the warrant, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$1 was worth $1. That was the day where $1 was worth $1.
The poor animal control person only got $25 for the whole year.
That wouldn't have
Well,
paid for a single poop fund.
Yeah, my favorite line budget was from like 1955, when the town clerk was given his yearly salary of $500, which wasn't so bad, except the town hall janitor got $550.
Okay, the same. I don't know, the same thing on Article 8. We don't know what those are.
Yeah, I'll have Stephanie come in at a future meeting. She was here earlier tonight. I think she logged off because she's got an early start tomorrow. But we did speak about this late last week, and that amount may get down to $60. She's working with Leanne on the other amount, and they may get to the bottom of this. But I told Stephanie to include, a conservative number, include the highest number she thinks it might be, knowing we can always go down from there. But this is just part of her effort to try to clean up some of these orphan accounts that haven't seen activity for a number of years. So it could be that, funds were reimbursed by the Commonwealth, but it was after a year was closed out, and maybe they weren't posted to the right account or something like that.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they actually were overspent. It just
In fact, I mean, sitting here, I think we have a high degree of confidence they probably were not overspent. So it was, probably just a timing issue or applying something to the wrong account.
Okay, tell us about 9, Angus. So, how are we going to have a number for that?
I've been working with Paul, and we don't have a number. I've suggested to him, and I know he's working toward this, of coming up with at least on a per clinic basis. Especially now that we have some experience with that. What are we seeing in terms of, the cost for police details, the cost for staff overtime, the cost for public health nurse, and any materials costs? We can at least come up with a, per clinic estimate of what the costs are. We do expect those would be reimbursable. But, that could take a while with the FEMA process and potentially having to go through another town's FEMA reimbursement if the vaccination is given to, let's say, Newburyport or Amesbury, and therefore they're the only ones who can seek FEMA reimbursement for that clinic.
So this could take like a year to get reimbursed or more.
Or more. I mean, if you think that, everyone in the country is going for FEMA money for one thing or another, there's got to be a huge logjam. So yeah, it could be more than a year. So that's the idea, is to have an account that we can charge the expenses to in the near term. Because right now, for instance, we've overspent the public health line item for the year, and we're continuing to incur costs on that. And I've recommended to Paul that they seek a reserve fund transfer. They haven't yet done that, but in the meantime, we're running a deficit in certain lines of the budget. So
Angus, how do we reconcile this? So we spend, I don't know, 90,000 out of this account, and then next year it comes in dribs and drabs, 10,000 here, 5,000 here, whatever, at different points. Is there going to be like a reconciliation of that, or we just assume that probably we're not going to get all the money back on this? That's just something. The reason I'm asking that, I think people will ask that at town meeting. They're going to say, "Okay, are we going to get this back from the federal government?" So people are going to ask that. So it's a worthwhile question.
Mhm.
So is this something that we're going to probably take some of this as a loss, do you think, or no?
I don't think so, because FEMA said they're going to reimburse 100% of costs associated with vaccination clinics. But it does get a little. That's where this regional effort, some of the complexity comes from, is if it's under, if a clinic, even though it's a regional clinic, is under the auspices of a single municipality that's actually been given the vaccine, and they're the only ones who can seek reimbursement from FEMA for that specific clinic. If we're incurring costs and 7 other communities are incurring costs, and we all send them to that host municipality, what if the total costs exceed what they get reimbursed? How is that allocated? So it honestly, if Stephanie and I had full-time effort to work on vaccine clinics, we would be busy. If that was all we had to do, we would be busy. So there are questions people will ask that we don't have the answers to, because we don't know. And we're working with a, regional effort, and there's, FEMA.
And then you have to throw in the whole issue of billing for the administration, insurance, health insurance wise, and everything else.
That's right. Yeah, it's incredibly complex. And so I can tell you that the priority from the health department, as it should be, is to get vaccine into people's arms and to set up the clinics. But that has resulted a bit in kind of the financial piece kind of being, we've got to kind of pick up the pieces, because they're, going forward full speed ahead. And
I mean, having said all that, we have to think of the big picture. If people are not getting vaccinated, the town, the Commonwealth, and the United States is in big trouble. So we have to do this. Damn the torpedoes, whatever it costs at the moment, whatever it costs, we'll deal with it later. Yeah.
That's kind of the how things have been going. And then we've got to figure out where the money comes from. And I wish I could stop time on all these 100 other projects and just do vaccine clinics, because there is that much work to do on it.
Okay, next.
But I've definitely, I've told Paul, and I'll tell him again. I know he's working on this, is, to get through the selectmen and the FinCom and town meeting, people are going to need to understand what kind of costs are we talking about. And to this day, I have not gotten anything, on that.
Not 5 figures, 6 figures. Do we anything? Okay.
No.
Okay. Article 10, proposed special town meeting, Article 10, to see if the town will vote to transfer available the sum of to fund unbudgeted personnel costs. So, something we need to do, but this again is in flux at the moment.
Yeah, and that's partly, as you know, to do with union contracts that there's a good chance won't be settled by the time of town meeting. So,
Okay.
Is that primarily what that's about, Angus? Is essentially union contracts that won't be settled by town meeting, or?
partly.
Yeah.
To see if the next one, to raise 18,000 to replace the public safety network server. Was this on the capital budget?
It's not. It's a little bit less than the $20,000 threshold for capital.
Okay, right. Okay. So Article 12, 15,000 to fund consulting support towards compliance with the stormwater management permit. So when would this be, Angus? Is this for like something we have to do ASAP, or what? It's in the special. So what's up with that?
Yeah, so we've been working toward, in hopes of having a stormwater bylaw to bring forward this spring. But, everyone's stretched pretty thin, to say the least. And we have had a couple of meetings of our stormwater working group. And Leah put in, some effort and had the support of her board to do that. And we had a meeting about, was it last week or the week before? I can't remember. But I think it was a week and a half ago. And we just felt that, she'd done some work. There are some model bylaws out there, but the specifics of our situation are complicated, because it's not just, we don't want to just layer a bylaw on top of our existing bylaws and subdivision regulations. Because if we're not clear in the regulation, then those who are regulated, the developers, won't be clear, and it could be a real mess. And if you have overlapping language in different bylaws and policies that's not internally consistent, that could create a real headache. And that's what we don't want to do. And that's the hazard of, if you just bring forward like a model bylaw and layer it on top of things, it's really got to be woven in more carefully. And one of the biggest continuing concerns that we have that has caused this to not go that quickly is who's actually going to do the work. How many, depending on whether this applies town-wide or only within this regulated stormwater area, the MS4 area, that affects how many potential permits may need to be issued in any given year. But then who's going to issue those permits? That's, whether that's planning or conservation or health, or potentially it could even be done at a staff level with like the DPW director, the permit granting authority. But someone's going to need to have public hearings, issue abutter notices, write decisions, probably manage a third-party review, like a consultant review. So it adds us an amount of work. And right now, no one's been kind of waving their hands saying that they want to do the work. So that's one of the concerns I have about going forward with it is if we're going to adopt a bylaw, someone has to be responsible to, enforce it, or not even before we even get to enforcement. Someone has to administer it. Someone has to hold hearings, issue permits, and so forth. So we have real capacity issues here in this town. We don't have a lot of staff. So that's part of why, we took it up to a certain point. We felt like we weren't ready to recommend we go forward. To your question, Archie, of the urgency, under our current MS4 permit, we're required to have a bylaw in place by the end of this fiscal year. And we've known for a couple
We
of
are?
that
Oh,
was going to, yeah, we are. And we've known for a couple of years that was the case. But we'd rather get dinged in our annual report for not having it than to do something that's not ready. But we felt that we've kind of we've taken it as far as we can go with existing staff capacity, because someone's got to take the time to, really see how this works with our existing bylaws and regulations. And we just don't have anybody on staff who has the combination of time and expertise to do that. So the idea would be to work toward a bylaw for the fall town meeting.
okay.
It's one of these things that's kind of like way far down on everybody's priority list, but it still has to, we just have to somehow get it done.
So, in terms of the budget going forward, this seems the stormwater is going to be a continuing, not problem, but with something we're going to have to deal with that we didn't used to have to deal with all. Now it's going to be an annual thing we have to deal with. Is this going to be in the operating budget going forward more?
Well, we did, as you know, in last year's budget proposal, so the current year operating budget, we did include an expense line in the DPW budget for stormwater.
Okay, how much?
We have broken that out as a separate category, and in fact,
Okay.
year to date, that line is already overspent. By the way, DPW as a whole is well within budget, but that line, because my approach is we want to charge the expenses to where they were actually incurred. Even though you reasonably put some of these in highways, sidewalk, and trees, I'd rather put it in stormwater so we get a true picture of what it actually costs to do it.
So do we, I guess my question is simply, okay, we have to do this for this, but should that line item be beefed up then in the future?
I think it should.
Yeah.
Will we know enough coming into this particular budget cycle you think to have a reasonable number?
We could, yeah. I mean, it's a 5-year permit, and we know we're in. I forget if we're in year 2 or year 3. I think we're in year 2, but we know what the next couple of years of conditions of permit will be. In terms of outfall testing and things that we need consultants to do. We don't have the expertise to do or the manpower. So yeah, we could assign cost estimates to at least some of that.
Okay, it's getting late. Let's finish up. So basically, the issue was whether the assessing department should their appraisal software should be changed to a different vendor, which would obviously entail purchasing a different brand of software, or upgrading the existing software which would necessitate buying a new server. So that's it in a nutshell. And the assessing department has not, Board of Assessors has not made a decision on that yet. So that's where it stands.
Right. They'll meet Wednesday and make a recommendation.
Angus, do you know, I get a couple questions about this. So, Patriot currently does the valuation work for the assessing department. Is this where Christian refers to Vision V8? Is Vision another company? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's not clear to me. So, do you know what is CAMA? CAMA? Is it that's and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was just trying to read it.
It's something to do with mass appraisal. It's an acronym I've been hearing for years. I've never actually Googled it and found out what it stands for.
Sometimes I can't figure
it's
out
something. Yeah, it's something to do with appraisals and assessing.
Okay.
Mike, do you happen to know what the acronym is?
No, I don't.
Okay. But essentially what it comes down to is the three choices are stick with the current software with some limited upgrade, and with Patriot, or Patriot's newest software, which maybe is not all that stable yet, or a new company and their software.
Computer assisted mass appraisal.
Okay. Of course. It was so obvious.
But yeah, that's how it's been. How it's been laid out. You see the materials, and obviously, I'm trying to get clear on, is this a nice to have or a need to have? Because we're looking for need to have, but not necessarily nice to have. So
Okay.
The next one's a little complicated to explain, but basically we want to get a outside consultant to help analyze and, I assume, conduct an evaluation of properties owned by public utilities such as National Grid in order to theoretically increase their assessment, which would then allow us to recoup the money we spent from the consultant to get increased tax money. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. And why this is happening? The only thing I don't. Why is this happening right now? That's what I don't understand. Has there been rulings that now that the new evaluations of utilities are allowable? Is that it, or?
yes, yeah, relatively recent. I think maybe it was could have been done as long as like maybe 2 years ago, but it's relatively recent that this became an allowable methodology to value the utility assets.
Yeah, if I remember right from when Rich Baker spoken about it before, I think currently it's based. The taxable value is based on fully depreciated value of the utility asset, and the new value will somehow tie with the income produced by the asset.
Right. So if you could imagine it, some telephone poles were probably put up, in the 40s, and they're still there. So they've been depreciated to zero, but
they produce income hand over fist.
Still valuable to the utility and still producing income. Yeah. So the final article is what we discussed, which should now, I guess, be on the annual town meeting, is that a citizen's petition to delay any additional expenditures on the Soldiers and Sailors building until a defined productive use for this building is identified and approved. So 10 signatures were required, and they have been so approved. Okay. So we can, we have gotten through all the articles. We can skip item J, and I'm gonna briefly just go through the a couple of things, and then it's getting really late. Let's go real quick, Angus. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's getting kind of late. So, with the revised job descriptions, as you know, those aren't before the board for approval so much as just disclosure and transparency. So obviously, we were, deeply thankful to Diane Faulkner for her many years of service as assistant town clerk, and saddened to see her officially retire, but very happy for her, of course. But sorry to see her go. So I've been talking to Mike ever since December, when we first learned that Diane was moving toward retirement, to talk about the idea of increasing the budgeted hours for the assistant town clerk position from 16 to a higher number, something closer to full-time hours, to give his office more support and to transfer some responsibilities from my office to his office, which in line with how a lot of other towns function in terms of the clerk's office. So what you have in front of you is some draft changes to 2 job descriptions, to the assistant town clerk job description and to the town manager and finance department job description. And you can probably see the idea is to move some things out of my office into the clerk's office. So Mike agreed that these changes make sense. I wanted to share them with the board because we didn't want to go ahead and post the assistant town clerk position in its current form at 16 hours a week. When looking ahead, we feel what we really need is more hours in that position. So happy to have any questions or discussion on that, but that's the approach we'd like to take.
No, I'm good with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I also. Yeah.
Great. So we will go ahead and post that assistant town clerk position, and obviously continuing funding at the higher than budgeted hours past past the end of the fiscal year would rely on approval of a budget that covers those additional hours. But for the remainder of this year, we're aware of other expense lines that are on track to be underspent, which can more than offset that cost. Next item, I put on, we had some, materials from some recent meetings. Just wanted to share those with the board. You already talked about the capital improvement, their scoring of the various projects. I included the slides in there with some updates on the school building project from the last meeting that we had as the school building committee. Parks and Rec had a very notable meeting this past Thursday evening, and they have another meeting this Wednesday, but they've they're going forward with trying to establish a more clear and transparent process to assign fees for use of town fields by non-town groups. And I think it was actually a really productive meeting Thursday night. It was, they sent notice to the various user groups. We had a number of people participate, and the feedback was generally pretty positive, even though in some instances fees would increase from what they have been traditionally. But I think the way the chair set that out, it was really transparent. everyone understands that a large part of what's driving the need for more revenues is the porta potty costs. But people on the call tended to agree that that was a really necessary level of service, and there was no one saying we shouldn't have those. It all comes down to what's the right balance between taxpayer-funded budget and other revenues that come from user groups. So the purpose of this Wednesday's Park and Rec meeting is for them to formalize their operating budget request for next year based on what they anticipate generating for non-tax revenues. And then finally, Community Preservation Committee, we already spoke to that earlier in terms of the projects they recommended and continued. So of the 5 proposed, they've recommended 3 and are continuing consideration of 2 others.
So thank you, Angus. Any anything for future agendas, Rick?
No.
I just had one comment. I know it's getting to we're already into March now, so I suppose we have to come to get this decided relatively soon. The rental for the children's castle. So where do we stand on the request for proposals for that and so forth?
So an RFQ was issued a few weeks ago, and we've already had one response come back. And we have it penciled in for the March 15th agenda for the board to review any proposals received. We know we've got the one. And
so what did we make the deadline to be?
Mike, remind me of the deadline.
March 12th.
Okay.
So 2 weeks from tonight, the board will, can make a decision to either award it or take more. Yeah, we're going to need to move pretty quickly. So presumably,
that's why somehow I remembered that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's written in for next agenda. So.
Okay.
So the lease terms are already set. It's just picking the person, and basically the selection committee will make a recommendation to the board of what was it, Selectmen, and you can vote it on that Monday.
Great. That's a good job that we got that done. That's good. Angus, I was going to say, but this would fall in line with the budget, with your proposed budget. Have we done? Now I can't remember. There's been so much going on. Did we get it? A end of December, 6-month year-to-date spending on accounts. Did we do that or not?
The board hasn't got it. I can send it to you easily. I run those probably every week or so. We run updated year-to-date reports. So, and it's in my budget document. I think the numbers I have there.
That's what I would figure. Yeah.
Yeah. I have them there from February 17th. So, now that 2 weeks have passed, I might be worth going and putting in I try to do the latest,
Okay, well, I would at least, I don't know if anyone else is, but I wouldn't mind looking at one. Okay.
Yeah, I can send you, there's one, Stephanie ran one for me a week or two ago. There were a couple of things that I flagged in there, and we've since met. There's a couple of journal entries, so I'd rather send you a current one.
Okay, well, I don't need paper. I can just look at it electronically.
Yeah. So we can run those very easily. So we'll send that tomorrow.
So that'll essentially represent the first 8 months of the fiscal year, if you're able to do it up through the end of last week.
Yep.
Great.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay, take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Good night.
All
Sorry.
right, thanks a lot.